According to a new study by the Society of Actuaries and Actuarial Foundation, financial advice you may have gotten in the past regarding retirement may have been miscalculated. Apparently, most retirement plans plan for years of level spending, but in reality, most people's spending decreases through retirement. And this could have a major impact on how pre-retirees save and how retirees draw down their money. My guest who writes about this in Newsweek is financial journalist Linda Stern. Linda, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
So talk about the study. What have we learned here about people's spending habits in retirement?
Well, there's two different things going on. The study itself found a lot of problems with all of those automated calculators that you use, that you can find all over the internet to help you plot your retirement spending. Some of them allow too much risk. A lot of them don't include the value of your house. But one of the things that stuck out to me is that most of these calculators assume that you'll peg your spending to your last year of work and then spend more every year with inflation. But in fact, people who retire actually spend less almost every year of their retirement.
Give me just an example of how spending decreases over time. I assume in the beginning of a retirement, that's when everybody wants to go traveling, and probably spending is fairly high in the first couple of years at least.
That's exactly right. The first 2 years, you're taking those trips, you're fixing up your house, you're buying new leisure clothes, you're building up your hobby workshop, and you just spend. Some people have called the 3 stages of retirement go-go, slow-go, and no-go. The idea being that at the beginning, you're just running everywhere and doing everything. In the middle, you sort of slow down a little bit. You take fewer trips. You just take your time, and you start to spend less. You're not buying clothes as much. Your home might be paid off. And then at the end of retirement, people spend very, very little unless they get hit with high long-term care costs.
Okay.
The Bureau of Labor Statistics actually has figures about this, and they've shown that spending falls 42% between early retirement and late retirement.
So that sounds like that would have a profound effect on how one plans to draw down money during retirement. Is this something that you think a lot of advisors are aware of, or is this just typically the blanket kind of calculation that everybody's using?
I think a lot of advisors are aware of this, but they're extremely cautious because there's no downside for them to sort of planning as conservatively as possible. But the truth is, this is good news for people who worry that they won't have enough money for retirement because they may need less money than they think they need.
Well, talk about, I guess, some of the caveats in this kind of approach that you talked about in your article, which I think would give people a better understanding in general of how retirement typically pans out.
Well, the problem is, I mean, it wouldn't be such a bad idea if you just started taking more money out of your nest egg the first couple of years of retirement, knowing that you would take less out in later years. But that becomes a problem if, A, you don't ever go back to taking less out, or B, the year you retire is a terrible year in the stock market and you end up pulling out a lot of money at the bottom of the market. That can sort of skew your savings all the way out. So advisors suggest that you sort of fudge it a little bit. If you take out a little bit more in the first couple of years, you make sure that you don't increase your withdrawals for inflation in later years until you catch up. In those mid-years when you're sort of going a little bit slower, you can catch up. Or some advisors say, well, as long as you're go-going everywhere, why don't you still work a little bit? Just work part-time or consult a little bit or make just enough money around the edges to pay for that extra trip.
Are there any particular retirement products that might fit this type of spending better than others?
Well, the insurance industry is really putting a lot of effort behind something called longevity insurance, which is really an annuity that doesn't kick in until you're 80 or thereafter. And the theory being that then you could spend more money in the early years knowing that your later years would be taken care of if you live to be very old or exceed your life expectancy. But those products are still pretty expensive, and the only advisors who don't sell insurance products are not really taken with them yet. It may be that as they evolve, they become cheaper and better. The other piece is long-term care insurance, which has been improving. And if you can find and afford a decent long-term care product that would help you pay for assistance either in your home or in an assisted living facility when you were in your late 80s or 90s, however old you needed it, that would free up some more money to spend earlier in your retirement.
Well, normally when I hear the words retirement has been miscalculated, I'm generally fearful for people, but in this case it actually, in some ways, as you said earlier, is good news.
Well, I'm generally an optimist on this. If you look at every generation, they've muddled through. And I think some of the fear that's been built up about people not saving enough for retirement has definitely been driven by the investment industry that just wants us to save as much as possible. But the caveat is there's really no downside to saving as much as possible. If you retire and you have too much money, that's not bad, right?
Right. My guest is financial journalist Linda Stern. You can find her in Newsweek, among other places. What other places can we find you, Linda?
I do a weekly column for Reuters,
Mm-hmm.
and I also am blogging daily now at CBS Money Watch,
All right, well,
which you can find online.
if it's okay with you, I'd like to count you as one of members of the panel of experts assembled in this area, if that's okay.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
This is Scott Drake, and you're watching Annuity News Now.